So welcome to CSC 235, our ACS virtual lab. You have just completed your first attempt at the Module 1 assessment. If I look at the statistics of the grade, so if I look at, I just printed that. If I look at the statistics in here.
Yes, ma'am.
Can everyone see the screen?
All right.
Yes.
So try to get a view. I don't know, probably.
Sure.
All righty. So can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing here is a breakout of how students did. We had two Bs in the 80 to 89% category, 3 Cs, a D, and one who posted more than 100%. So actually with the extra credit, logged more than 100%. The average for the class was a 3.9, which is just shy of 80. So that's in the high Cs, that's high 70s for a class average. And that's really strong for a first attempt of a module assessment. So my congratulations to those of you who took the time to review the study guide and material and read the textbook and make sure you caught all the details associated with the assignments and the solution. The minimum score was at a 62. So basically if you multiply by 2 and then add, slide the decimal place. So a 5-point scale is pretty easy to calculate. And in any case, so we had from min to max score, we had like 40% range, which is pretty normal. Any questions about how the assessment performance fared with our initial results? What I'd like to do now is analyze the items that pose the greatest challenge for students and then post a reconciliation. We'll talk about that briefly. For those of you that have had me in previous classes, you already know how reconciliation works. You're free to clear at that point of the class. And if you're new to courses with me and you've never reconciled before, we can walk through that very quickly. So when we perform an item analysis, what we're doing is saying that the assessments and the modules are for your benefit. The goal is mastery learning. We don't want you to learn everything in the book or in the, that the textbook authors would, a lot of textbook authors for our courses, they create very authentic, very credible, very substantial references and resources. But the reality is, in most of our disciplines, when you try to take in 600, 750, 900 pages, it's a tough thing to do. And what we're doing is identifying the core concepts, knowledge, skills, and abilities we want you to know really well. And that's the goal of mastery learning. Now, why do I tell you this? When we perform an item analysis using Blackboard does not necessarily, the algorithms and the item analysis do not take into account a mastery learning environment, right? So what will happen is that we'll take a look at our results, and then you'll retake the assessment. You'll work a final attempt of the assessment. And when you do, you're going to find some statistical results appear very differently. It'll look like, oh my gosh, we have lots of poor or cannot calculate questions. The discrimination algorithm in Blackboard basically wants to gauge whether students are all answering the same way, whether there's any variation between student answers. And if they all answer the same and they're all correct, what will happen is that you'll get these cannot calculate or poor questions, because it looks like, well, those are too easy. You'll notice the difficulty here. We're right in that sweet spot. We don't have very many hard questions. We don't have too many easy questions, but we have questions the Blackboard algorithm says are appropriate because they're medium difficulty, right? So that's a good mix to have right here. Not too many easy, not too many hard, most of them in the medium zone. There were 18 possible questions. And here's the part that I would encourage you to consider. So it's really useful to walk through this the first time, because what does this tell us? Well, how much time did we give you for the assessment? Was it 45 minutes or 60 minutes?
60 minutes.
60 minutes. So if we gave you 60 minutes to tackle nearly 20 questions, that means you would have on average 3 minutes per question. You'd know the answer to some. The average student took a little more than half the time allotted, and yet we had some lower scores, right? So where am I getting at? What am I getting at? The module assessments are open book, right? So there's nothing that says you can't have the study guide open and you use the Control F key sequence to pull up a search prompt. And when you're looking at an item and you're not certain, you can check the facts, right? Doesn't take much. You just use Control F, and whether you're in a web browser or you're in a PDF with Adobe Acrobat, or you're working with PowerPoint slides, or regardless of what the reference is, right? You can check that out. So you can put a key term for that assessment item in there just to check your facts. Again, this is a mastery learning environment. It's not considered cheating. In fact, we want you to become efficient and effective at referencing your information, because there is so much of it. And if you're going to be competent in the workplace, I mean, nobody knows everything. And in technology, if you do, it only takes 2 or 3 years for some of that knowledge to become obsolete with new innovations. Does everyone understand what I'm getting at here? I would love to see the next time you take an assessment for a first attempt that you allow yourself more time, and you use the technology, right? So in a sense, a Respondus browser security application that prevents you from referencing things online, that's not a part of this, right? We're not operating in that manner. Now, how is it that the examinations, the cumulative exams, differ? Well, the cumulative exams are going to involve a lot more material, and it's not open book, and you won't have the time to look up stuff. So by the time we get to the midterm and the final, you're going to want to know this stuff really well. So the intent for how to work module assessments is different enough where we want to take some time to encourage you to maximize this as a learning resource, right? That's a little different than other classes. Now you'll notice that as I look at these questions listed, I want to make sure they're all displayed on the screen, and they are 1 through 18. And I'm going to search for the average score beginning from lowest to highest. These are in descending order, the ones at the very top are the ones that challenge students the most. So if students could earn a quarter of a point or 0.25, but the average was a 0.08, it means that a little less than 1/3 of the credit was logged for this item, right? If you do the math, 0.08 divided by 0.25, it's like a little less than a third logged credit for this item. Any questions here? Let's take a look at each of these items. And by the way, is everybody with us or is everybody hearing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, everyone here.
Okay, so everybody's on screen, everybody's good. All right.
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Okay, awesome. So in this multiple choice question, it says, oh my, is that a typo right there?
I was curious I didn't know what it was because I was looking. I don't remember seeing that in the book study guide. I was like,
Facts. Like,
Yeah,
I was
I
so confused when I
wanted to
saw it.
email you. I wanted to email you about it, but then I was just like, I know what you're saying, but then I forgot to actually email you about it after I took
Oh, so let's
the test.
no, let's talk about this. If you're the first to email me about something that's goofy like that, I don't know what happened, but I can assure you that the first or earlier versions of the assessment item did not include the past tense of a naughty word, right? I'm trying to remember exactly what the original sentence says. Something, something, that guidance, it wouldn't be that. Instead of a SH, it would be a TH. What guidance? Does everybody see it's a W? That should read what. Yeah, that makes sense because the S is near the W. So that might be a typo. What guidance is recommended when a host system has limited hard disk space and a user wished to create a virtual machine? Choose the option below that reflects the best use of virtual systems with limited physical resources. So we don't have a lot of hard disk space. What do you do to make sure that you can work with your host machine to ensure you address limited physical resources? Well, the best answer is this one. Certain install images. So when you have a host system that has limited hard disk space and someone wants to create a virtual machine, you could uninstall a lot of software. You could delete a lot of things on your system, but let's face it, some host machines, I mean, you still don't have a lot of hard disk space. What am I saying? We have students in our classes that have very modest personal technology resources. They could have an 80 gigabyte hard drive and Windows takes all of 40 gigs, right? So what do you do in that case? Now, if you look in your study guide and the references, there was mention of something that said, hey, if you use Linux, you can create a virtual machine with as little as 10 gigabytes, right? And in fact, for the solution, if you did not have enough resources, there was another option. It said in the details for the solution that if you did not free up a lot of hard disk space by optimizing your personal technology, that you should contact the instructor, and I was going to give you like an image you could download for much less. We even talked about something called Debian in class at one point. Does anyone recall my mention of Debian and how small the footprint is? Maybe not. Okay. So 2 students said certain install images, for example, Windows Server, use less hard disk with a valid license key. No, that's an inaccurate answer because the install image doesn't take up more or less space based on the license key. Okay. And then this one says an option other than VirtualBox will allow the setup of a smaller virtual system if space is an issue. No, that's not an accurate answer either, because you could use VMware. You could use, on a Mac, you could use something called Parallels, or you could use other options, but basically they're still going to require a lot of hard disk space for a virtual hard disk. Use of the cloud will allow the setup of a smaller virtual system if space is an issue. Well, that's not true. A virtual system in the cloud is no different than a virtual system on your local machine. I mean, now providers would be more efficient about how they provision the hardware. So I'm sure they'd be willing to argue and say, oh yeah, no, if you pay money for our cloud environment, you know, we're maximizing the efficiency of the resources. Well, they charge you for every little bit you use, every gigabyte, every of RAM or hard disk space. So that's not a good option, because if you're using the cloud, it's not free, and the more space you use, the more you pay. And does anyone have any questions about this? Now, when we retake the final version of the Module 1 assessment, I guarantee you, you will not see the word, that word here. You'll see the word what, okay? Any questions about this item before we go on to the next one?
No.
Okay. Again, my apologies for that. That was an unintended clerical error. And if you highlight it and get a screenshot and email it to me, and you're the first one to do it, I'll post additional credit in the grade book for you. So please do. If it doesn't seem right, raise a flag. Time permitting. All right, let's look at the next one. We had a multiple choice. Now, the ones that are really killer, if you have a low score, are the multi-answers, because those are worth a lot more. And I don't think we do have some multi-answers down here. So even though those are 0.29, the total possible score for a multi-answer is typically a 0.5 or 0.75, right? So this is another case where, now we'll talk about the multi-answer later. What factor? So there's a multiple choice question. So far as industry trends come and go, in computer and tech industry, virtualization has developed into a strong and long-term trend. Now that's whether we do virtualization locally on your own host machine, or you do virtualization in the cloud. So that's just one thing I want to add to this question here. What one factor made common use of virtual systems possible? Choose the best answer from options below. Moore's law. Gary Moore was a pioneer at Intel. In fact, he's one of the company founders. And Intel microprocessors has basically been the stuff of legend. For a long time, they had nearly a monopoly. Except for a couple of other chip manufacturers, Intel dominated. Moore essentially said that every 18 months to 2 years, the power and capability of computer processors and hardware doubles. So every 18 months to 2 years, the performance and capacity of CPUs doubles. And I think in this class, I don't know if you remember me saying this, but I tried to say, well, you could buy a Lamborghini or a Maserati for 25 cents, right? And it would go from zero, right? Or you could buy a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud for 25 cents, and it would drive 1,000,000 miles on a gallon of gas. And it would go from 0 to 60 in 1,000th of a second, right? I made some kind of, anybody remember that kind of comparison in class? Please say yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So All right, so Moore's law. Well, how did Moore's law make that possible? The hardware is so much more capable than the operating system and software. Most servers, if you buy a brand new server from Dell, you can run server software on there, and you can use a single server physically, or you can install servers as virtual machines, and you can run 5, 6, 10, 12, 20 servers on one hardware platform. And that's because of Moore's law, because the hardware has outstripped everything else. Now, anyone, let's see, these other answers, the von Neumann model, well, that has to do with the components in hardware, but that's not the reason why virtualization has developed so strongly. And again, the internet and the cloud. The internet and the cloud has made virtual systems readily accessible. If you get on the internet, but there are a lot of places in the world where you don't have good internet access, and so that would be a close second. But the cloud isn't. The cloud came after virtual machines. Virtual machines have been around much longer than the internet and the cloud. So put another way, the internet didn't come first, and then virtual machines became popular because of the internet. All right, there's a true-false question. We have some students that did not answer this correctly. Gordon, I said Gary Moore. It was Gordon Moore. Gordon Moore was the computer science pioneer who created the common model of hardware components used for all computer systems. That would be John von Neumann. So that answer should be false. John von Neumann is the one who came up with the common model of hardware components. Any questions on this item? Okay, we're going to move along a little faster. RAM. So one of the things we wanted people to understand in terms of the host platform, the basic hardware components, one way to understand what random access memory does for a computer system is to compare a computer system to a workshop. So your PC or your laptop, it's kind of a miniature workshop. Select from the options below. RAM is like the blank of a workshop. And the answer that we explicitly state in your study guide is RAM is like the workbench, right? Now, everybody understands that a workshop that has any kind of decent capacity, a workshop also has shelves and cupboards and storage bins, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so shelves and cupboards and storage bins would be the input-output piece. We would say that part of a workshop is similar to the way the hard disk of a computer system works. So a hard disk is like the shelves and storage bins and yeah, that kind of stuff. But wherever you're doing the actual work, you have to have a work area like a work table or a workbench. And I'm going to pause just a second here, if you don't mind. So if you have a workshop and you have a workbench or a work table, that's kind of like your work area. And the CPU is like the craftsman or craftswoman, you know, the worker in the shop that lays hold of tools and resources and places them on the workbench. So your workbench is like the RAM, the random access memory, and the craftsman is like the CPU, the one that's actually doing the action, right? And the CPU basically has to pull stuff out of hard disk, put it in a workplace where you can access both the instructions of the application and the data that the software is operating on. So if you don't have a lot of RAM, what it says is you have a workshop, but you have a teeny tiny little workbench or a teeny tiny little work table. I want you to understand that the more RAM you have, the less often you have to go to the shelves and storage bins and cupboards, right? So intuitively, what you have is a case where if you have more RAM, you don't stress your hard drive as much. And your CPU has an easier time because it's all laid out for that craftsman within arm's reach, right? So having more RAM means less stress on the CPU and less stress on the hard drive. And I think we kind of described that and explained that in the study guide. All right, moving right along. So we'll keep running until we get to the 0.25 here, the 0.22 questions, because those are nearly perfect. It means that only one student made a mistake here, unless you would prefer to go over those, and then we'll zip down instead. We'll skip over the ones everybody got correct. So if you see 0.25, it's multiple choice and we can't calculate what kind of a question it was, whether it was good, bad, or ugly. That means, woohoo, everybody got it right. The ordering question, multi-answers, those are challenge areas we'll hit at the end. So this multiple choice question posed a challenge for a number of students. It says, before planning to use a virtual system, like the ones shown in our textbook, what critical step must be taken before creating the virtual system? And this was actually an activity. It was an assignment, 1.2 assignment. The personal technology used to run the virtual system must be optimized. Now, that's also true whether you're using a server instead of just a personal laptop or a PC. Other answers, we talked about virtual technology options. This does have to happen, but on many systems, those are enabled by default. On Macs, they're enabled by default. That is a requirement. If this were a multi-answer question, you'd want to select this one as well, because you'd want to check to see that the BIOS has those options enabled. But basically, this option right here is far more important. So we have a lot of people who prepare their system to create a virtual machine, and they turn on the technology, but their personal technology is in terrible shape and they have a terrible experience. It's slow, it doesn't run right, it crashes. So in that manner, the preparation of the host machine is far more important in terms of getting ready to build and create. Now, this is a step, and this is a step of the personal technology preparation. So when you optimize the personal technology, this is one of the steps that you take. So this answer isn't as complete, and I hope that makes sense. Any questions? All right, moving right along. Define hypervisor. So this multiple choice question asks, how best would you define the term hypervisor? Select the best definition from choices below. Now this is in study guide and textbook, right? It allows the physical resources of a host to be shared with other guest systems. So there's a picture in your book where you have multiple virtual machines that are running on one single host. The other options weren't as good as far as answers. Provide host applications to guests as needed. Well, if that's true, it means that a virtual machine running on a host can hack the host. That's not good, right? It says translates type 1 hardware requests into type 2 virtual requests. That's also not a good answer. Although we did define we did explain that there are two types of hypervisors, right? So this is a bogus answer because it's talking about type 1 hardware versus type 2 virtual requests. I just threw type 1 and type 2 into a gibberish answer, but we do talk about type 1 and type 2 hypervisors. Moving right along. How is type 1 different from type 2? How is a type 1 hypervisor different from a type 2 hypervisor? Select the best options from choices below. Well, a type 1 is installed over bare metal directly onto the hardware and is more efficient. But a type 2 hypervisor allows you to use the host machine for other purposes. So there are cases where, I mean, let's face it, would any of you want to take your personal computer or your laptop and wipe it out to put in a type 1 hypervisor? But sucks to be you. You can't do any gaming on it. You can't browse the internet. You can't do email. You can't load any other applications. So that's one thing that we didn't highlight in class, but I just thought I would point that out. Why do type 2 hypervisors exist in the first place? Well, a lot of times people want to use a virtual machine, but they also want to use that host platform for a variety of other purposes. I hope that makes sense. Does anyone have any questions about this?
No.
Okay, and if I say something that doesn't make sense or it doesn't add up, I would very much like you to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't get that. So this multiple choice question, this will be the last of the multiple choice questions. Then we'll zip down to the ordering and the multi-answer, unless of course somebody wants us to go over these others. So you want to ensure a virtual system has all of the resources required for operation, reserved or designated on a host so that no other applications can use that part of the hard disk. So we want to partition, or we want to utilize the hard disk so that we don't have the hard disk juggling so much between running applications and then, oh, here's the virtual machine, and now, oh, here's another set of applications running there also. You also want the best performance. So this is the other criteria. We want the best performance from the virtual system. Which install option is better? You want to use a fixed size. If you use a dynamic size, that saves a lot of disk space. But you're sharing the physical hard disk with other applications on the physical host. And as the virtual machine keeps growing and it's used more, it's taking up more and more of the host hard drive. So you can run into a case where you run out of disk space on your host platform, and then it crashes because you're running a virtual machine on it that took up too much space. If you use a fixed size, you're saying, okay, I'm going to reserve that hard disk space. It's going to be isolated as a virtual hard disk, and it has all of the space I intend for it to have up front. So it's one big file and it's reserved up front. It's designated. That way, the rest of the platform, the rest of the host can be used for anything else and you're not going to crash. Any questions?
No questions.
Okay. Now let's zip down to the ordering and the multi-answer questions, because those were, now notice everybody scored max for the von Neumann, I think. I don't think anybody, do we have anybody that had, nope. Everybody was able to, everybody got 100% on labeling the diagram. Yay. Awesome. So ordering, essentially it says, when optimizing personal technology for virtual systems, there are certain tasks that must be performed in a given order, or the prospects for a good result are greatly reduced. So if you rush and you're in a hurry and you go ahead and you set up virtual memory at first, oh my gosh, it's horrific. If you, that's one case where if you go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to set up virtual memory. So I'm going to reserve a special area of the hard disk to maximize the performance of my laptop or my PC. So when I'm running the virtual machines, I get great performance and I don't suffer any slowness for the regular apps that I'm running normally on my host machine, right? On my Windows desktop. That step comes last. That has to be last in the order. The third step right before that would be, so we're working backwards. The third step would be disk optimization. So you're working cleanup and defrag before you set up the permanent swap file. Put another way, if you have lots of large empty open space on your hard disk and then you set up the virtual memory, then when your RAM is having to flip lots of data back and forth for that virtual machine, it can flip out the entire football field instead of just a few yards on the line, right? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but the second thing that you're going to do is disk cleanup. So if you optimize before you clean up, you don't get any benefit. And of course, you need to download all your system updates. So if you update first, then do a cleanup, then defrag, then set up your virtual memory. Now, when I say virtual memory, I don't know that I've shared this with you yet, but we've talked about it briefly, so I'll show you quickly. If you go into your machine and you go into properties, where it says this computer or my computer, and then you go to the system screen here and you go to advanced system settings. You can go to normally you'd see this, it shows the computer name and the work group you're a part of. But if you go to the advanced tab, there's a performance option and you can click settings and you can tweak this to say, okay, I want it to perform for best performance, right? I'm going to adjust the settings in my operating system for best performance or best appearance. So you'd do this, but then another thing you'd do is click the second advanced tab and you would set up a permanent swap file where you isolate and designate the hard drive space. Here you see I have like a 120 gig hard drive and I'm setting up 10% of the space, 12 gigs. And I tell this system, okay, now that I've optimized and defragmented and all that, I want a huge chunk of that disk. And I don't want it to be any smaller than or any larger than 10%. And it carves out that empty space. It's like adding more work table or workbench. Let me say that again. It's like adding more work table or workbench. I have seen, and look at what it would do otherwise. Oh, it would reserve 16 megabytes, or it would reserve around 2 gigs. And here you see, I'm telling it, no, I know how much space I have, and I want you to say, I want more work table. I want more workbench. So I'm using virtual memory to supplement the RAM that I have. And the performance of a PC or a laptop can double when you do this, but only if you follow the steps. Only if you follow the steps. Any questions about this particular feature in Windows? All right, moving right along. Let's keep going. We'll have just enough time to finish the last 2 questions in 2 more minutes. So virtualization, it says, and this is multiple answer. For multiple answer, remember that you do not want to select an item if there's any doubt that it is a correct choice. Otherwise, you'll lose points, okay? So there are a number of important advantages that result from the use of virtual systems. Your textbook outlines this, and we talk about it in the study guide. Select the options below that best reflect the advantages. Well, it reduces the cost to operate more systems. We said the average hardware server can actually run 10 virtual machines. Virtual systems simplify computer and hardware management. That's because you can have 16 different flavors of brands and models of the hardware components on the physical host, but the virtual machines are all the same. So basically, you can slide a virtual machine between hosts without any problem. Virtual systems are more resilient, allow for experiments, and provide better backups. So you can tell it to record the changes by turning on a feature, and then if you blow it up, you can say, okay, now rewind and go back to this point in time. So it'll restore that virtual machine to the state it was before you blew it up. It's huge. And we've explained that in a variety of different ways, but there you have it. One more way of explaining how snapshots are the bomb. And they're just an awesome feature. You just got to have lots of disk space for that. All right, last item we'll review, and then we're done. Virtualbox is distinctly different from other virtual solutions. Select the answers below or answer below that correctly reflect these differences. Well, Virtualbox is the only one that has versions that can run on any kind of physical host, right? And it uses the host operating system as the hypervisor for guest virtualization. For the guest virtual systems, there's a component of the operating system that's directly utilized. So it's kind of like an innovation that Oracle likes to claim. It's like, well, our hypervisor is advanced because, and we make explicit mention of this in our study guide. The rest of the answers are bogus answers. It's available as a trial. No, that would be VMware Workstation. And after the trial is gone, it's not very good. And Microsoft has trials. It is promoted by Microsoft, who makes virtual solutions for every platform. No, Microsoft only makes virtual solutions for who? Microsoft. It is available at no cost for a limited trial period, which can be renewed. Nope. It's free and it's not limited. Any questions about this last item? Okay. Well, I will post a reconciliation option where you can make quick corrections of your errors. I'll include a short video in the reconciliation, which will be this recording. So we walk through each of the items to review, okay, what was good, bad, and ugly about it. And then in order to reconcile your mistake, all you're doing is opening up a Word document and then typing out words of the question instead of the words of the answer, right? And I mean, the words of the question and then only the words of the correct answer. For those of you that have had me in other classes, you know what I'm talking about. Does anybody have any questions before we stop? And
Not from me.
Nope, none for me.
okay. Well, congratulations again on a strong showing for your first attempt of the module assessment, and keep your eyes posted for the reconciliation assignment. And if you have any other makeup work that you're doing yet for the module 1 assessments or solution, if you can get it in this week, that'd be great, because we're going to be posting the scores for credit before the weekend is over. All right, we'll stop recording.